I never thought my own flesh and blood could betray me with such vicious cruelty, ripping 68 years of love to shreds in a single, unforgivable moment. I'm in my son James's Ohio kitchen, clutching a coffee mug, the morning light mocking my fragile hope for peace. My grandson, Lucas, barely looks up from his phone, his voice dripping with entitlement. Grandma, hand over your pension card. I need a new gaming rig. It's nothing to you. Nothing? I snap back, my voice shaking with defiance. No, Lucas. That's my lifeline, my medicine, my survival. That's when James explodes. His eyes blaze with a rage I've never seen, a monster wearing my son's face. He snatches my mother's cherished rose-patterned bowl, my last piece of her, and smashes it against the counter, shards slicing the air like knives. Before I can scream, he grabs the kettle, its boiling water hissing like his fury, and pours it straight onto my lap. The pain is unbearable, a white, hot agony searing through my skin, burning deeper than flesh, incinerating every ounce of trust I ever had. I scream, my hands clawing at the air, coffee spilling, my world collapsing. James looms over me, his voice a venomous hiss. You're useless if you won't give us that card, Mom. Get out of my house. Useless? After all I've sacrificed? My thighs blister, my heart bleeds, and my soul rages at the son who turned love into a weapon. How could he do this? How could my boy become my tormentor? Stay with me, because this isn't just pain. It's a fire that forged my fight, and I'm not done yet. That scalding water wasn't just a burn on my skin. It was a wake-up call, a brutal slap tearing through the illusion I'd built around my son James. I'm Margaret Thompson, 68, a retired nurse who thought she'd found a safe haven in her son's two-bedroom house on a quiet street in suburban Ohio. After a car accident left me with a fractured hip and a cane, I moved in with James and his son, Lucas, 3 years ago. Their split-level home, with its overgrown garden and creaky porch swing, felt like a place to heal. I'd water the roses, cook pot roast on Sundays, and tell myself this was family, but it wasn't. It was a trap, and I was too blind to see it. James, my only child, 40 years old and jobless, had been eyeing my pension like a vulture. That morning, after Lucas's entitled demand for my card, James didn't just break a bowl, he broke me. As I sat there, thighs throbbing, coffee dripping onto the linoleum, he towered over me, his voice a low growl. You're living under my roof, Mom. You owe us. Hand over the card, or you're out. Owe them? I'd paid their electric bill, bought groceries, even covered Lucas's new sneakers. $200 for a kid who wouldn't look me in the eye. I stared at the shattered bowl, its rose pattern mocking my mother's memory, and felt my heart crack wider than my hip ever did. James wasn't my protector. He was my jailer. I didn't speak. My silence wasn't weakness, it was rage, boiling hotter than the water soaking my skirt. I'd given him everything, my savings, my trust, my years. And now he'd turned my love into a debt. As I hobbled to the sink, hands shaking, wiping the burns with a dish towel, I heard Lucas mutter, "She's so stubborn." Stubborn? For wanting to keep the money that kept me alive? That was the moment I knew this house wasn't home. It was a battlefield, and I wasn't going to lose. But how do you fight your own son when he's already drawn blood? I needed answers, and I needed them fast. The sting of that boiling water on my thighs, the jagged shards of my mother's rose-patterned bowl scattered across James's kitchen floor. They weren't just wounds. They were a scream, shattering the lie I'd been living in his Ohio home. I thought I was part of a family, safe in that split-level house with its sagging porch swing and overgrown roses. But safety? That was a cruel illusion, one I'd let James weave around me like a spider's web. For 3 years, I'd limped through his world, my cane tapping out a rhythm of gratitude for a roof I didn't realize was a prison. That morning, when he smashed that bowl and poured scalding water on me, I saw the truth. I wasn't his mother anymore. I was his prey. It started so quietly, I barely noticed the chains tightening. James offered to manage my pension checks, his voice all honey and concern. "You don't need the stress, Mom. I'll handle it." I believed him, handed over my trust like it was just another grocery list. But then the clues piled up, sharp as the broken porcelain under my feet. My bank statements vanished from the mailbox. James said he'd gone paperless to make things easier. Easier for who? I started noticing new toys in his house. A gleaming 60-inch TV mounted in the living room, a chrome-plated motorcycle hogging the garage. "Just got a deal," he'd say, flashing a grin that used to warm my heart, but now chilled it. I'd press him, my voice tight. "James, where's the money for this coming from?" He'd wave me off, casual as if I'd asked about the weather. "Relax, Mom. It's all under control." Control? He meant his control. One sleepless night, I dragged myself to his ancient computer, my hips screaming with every step. My fingers shook as I logged into my bank account, using a password I'd kept secret in the back of my mind. The screen lit up, and my breath caught. $12,000 drained in 8 months. Charges to gadget stores, cash apps, even a boat rental company. A boat? We lived 2 hours from the nearest lake. I confronted him at breakfast, my voice a raw edge. "James, why are there withdrawals I didn't approve?" He leaned back, eyes cold as steel. "You're getting old, Mom. You're confused. That's for bills, for this house you're living in." His words weren't just a dismissal. They were a threat, slicing through the air like a blade. My chest tightened, not just with fury, but with the sickening truth. My son wasn't protecting me. He was plundering me. It wasn't just my money he stole. James cut me off from the world, like a farmer fencing in livestock. I used to meet my old friends at the corner diner every Wednesday, sharing coffee and stories about the grandkids, but James started intercepting my plans. "You're not up for it, Mom," he'd say, his voice dripping with fake concern. "I told them you're resting." Resting? I was trapped. He'd tell the neighbors I was too frail to chat, so they stopped knocking. I'd stand on the porch, waving at Mrs. Henderson across the street, but she'd just nod and hurry away, like I was a shadow of myself. I overheard him on the phone with Ellie Parker, my oldest friend, his tone smooth as glass. "Mom's not doing well. Best not to disturb her." Disturb me? Ellie's calls were the only thing keeping me sane, and he'd turned them into whispers I couldn't hear. Lucas, my grandson, was just as bad. 18. All attitude and earbuds, he'd slump through the house like I was invisible. I caught him once, using my credit card for some online game, $300 gone in a single weekend. When I called him out, my voice shaking with betrayal, he just smirked. "Dad said it's no big deal, Grandma. Why you freaking out?" Freaking out? That was my life he was spending, my security. To them, I was just a faucet to turn on whenever they wanted more. Every night I'd lie awake in that guest room, the walls closing in, their indifference heavier than the pain in my hip. I'd given James my love, my savings, my everything, and he'd turned it into shackles. The worst part? I'd let him convince me I was too broken to manage my own life. I'd handed over my checkbook, my freedom, my voice, all because I thought that's what mothers do. But that boiling water, that shattered bowl, they lit a fire in me, hotter than the burns on my skin. I wasn't just a victim. I was a fighter, and I'd fought worse battles than this. But how do you fight your own son when he's already stolen so much? As I sat there pressing a bag of frozen corn against my thighs, a spark flickered. Ellie's number tucked away in an old notebook under my bed. Could I reach out? Could I claw my way back? I didn't know. But I knew I couldn't stay here, not when every corner of this house screamed the truth. I was being erased. The truth hit me like a freight train, and it hurt worse than the boiling water James poured on me. Worse than the shattered bowl that carried my mother's memory. I thought I'd seen the depth of his betrayal. $12,000 stolen from my pension, my friends pushed away, my life locked behind his lies. But I was wrong. The real knife was still waiting, hidden in a stack of papers that would break me all over again. Sitting in that Ohio guest room, my thighs still raw from the burns, I rummaged through James's desk, desperate for something, anything to explain why my son had turned into a stranger. That's when I found it, a manila envelope tucked under a pile of junk mail labeled property records. My hands shook as I opened it, not ready for the gut punch inside. There it was, in black and white, a mortgage agreement on my house, the one I'd signed over to James 3 years ago, when he said it'd simplify my medical bills after the car accident. The house my late husband Tom and I had built with our savings, where we'd raised James under the oak tree out front. Now it was collateral for a $50,000 loan, and my signature was scrawled at the bottom. But I hadn't signed it. Not that paper. Not ever. My heart stopped, then pounded like a drum. James had forged my name, gambled my home, my last piece of Tom, for his own greed. I sank to the floor, the papers spilling around me like ashes of a life I thought I'd protected. I confronted him that evening, my voice a raw scream I barely recognized. "James, what is this? You mortgaged my house? With a fake signature?" He stood in the kitchen, arms crossed, his face a mask of defiance. "You're blowing this out of proportion, Mom. I needed the money to keep us afloat. You want to keep living here, don't you?" Afloat? I'd been paying their bills, $300 for utilities, $500 for groceries, while he spent my pension on motorcycles and TVs. I gripped my cane so hard my knuckles turned white. "This was my home, James. Mine and your father's. How could you?" His eyes narrowed, cold as a January wind. "It's my house now, and if you don't hand over that pension card, you'll lose it all. I'll make sure of it." His words weren't just a threat, they were a guillotine, severing the last thread of hope I had for the boy I'd raised. Lucas was there, slouched against the counter, scrolling on his phone like my world wasn't collapsing. I turned to him, desperate for a shred of decency. "Lucas, did you know about this?" He shrugged, not even looking up. "Dad said it's no big deal. Just chill, Grandma." Chill? My home, my memories, my everything was slipping away, and he couldn't even spare me a glance. I stumbled back to the guest room, my hip throbbing, my chest so tight I could barely breathe. I collapsed onto the bed, clutching the old photo of Tom and me on our wedding day, his smile frozen in time. Tears burned my eyes, hotter than the water James had poured on me. I'd given him my love, my trust, my home, and he'd sold it all for a quick buck. I wasn't just betrayed, I was erased. The pain wasn't just the loss of the house. It was the realization that James didn't see me as his mother anymore, just a mark to be conned. Every memory of him, teaching him to ride a bike, cheering at his high school games, felt like a lie. I sat there, staring at the photo, whispering to Tom's image. I failed us. I let him take everything. The room was silent, but the weight of my grief was deafening. I'd lost more than money or a house. I'd lost the son I thought I knew, and with him, the last piece of my identity as a mother. But in that darkness, a flicker of something else stirred. Not just pain, but fury. a fire that refused to die. I remembered Ellie Parker, my old friend who'd warned me last year. "James is using you, Margaret. Don't let him." Her number was still in my address book, buried under a stack of linens. Could I call her? Could I fight back when everything I'd built was crumbling? I didn't know, but as I clutched that photo, my tears drying into resolve, I knew one thing. I couldn't let James win. Not like this. I needed to find a way out, a way to reclaim what was mine, before he took the last thing I had left, myself. The weight of that forged mortgage paper, with my name scrawled in someone else's hand, crushed me heavier than the pain of my burned thighs or the loss of my mother's rose-patterned bowl. Sitting on that creaky guest bed in James's Ohio house, clutching Tom's wedding photo, I felt like I'd been buried alive under the wreckage of my own trust. My son had stolen more than $12,000 from my pension, cut me off from my friends, and now he'd mortgaged the home Tom and I built, the one place that still held our laughter, our dreams. But as my tears dried, something else took root. A fire, not of pain, but of defiance. I wasn't just a mother betrayed. I was a woman who'd survived worse than James could ever imagine, and I was done letting him write my story. That night, with the house silent except for the hum of Lucas's video games, I dragged myself to the closet, my cane thumping against the hardwood. My hip screamed, but I didn't care. Under a pile of old sweaters, I found it, an address book, its leather cover worn soft from years of use. Inside, in my own shaky handwriting, was Ellie Parker's number. Ellie, my old friend, the one who'd seen through James's charm when I was too blind. Last year, over coffee at the diner, she'd leaned in, her eyes sharp. "Margaret, he's using you. Don't let him take everything." I'd brushed her off then, too loyal to my son. Now, her words echoed like a lifeline. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands trembling as I dialed her number. The phone rang twice before her voice came through, warm but urgent. "Margaret, it's midnight. You okay?" "No," I said, my voice raw, barely above a whisper. "Ellie, he forged my signature. He mortgaged my house. I don't know what to do." There was a pause, then her tone turned steel. "You're getting out. Now. Pack a bag. I'm coming to get you." I froze, the weight of her words sinking in. Leave? Could I? This house, even with its betrayal, was all I had left. But then I looked at Tom's photo, his eyes steady and kind, and I heard his voice from years ago. "You're tougher than you know, Maggie." He was right. I wasn't staying in this prison, not one more day. I moved slowly, my hip protesting with every step, but I didn't stop. I pulled a battered suitcase from the closet, stuffing it with clothes, my medications, and a small cedar box holding Tom's old watch and our marriage certificate. Every creak of the floorboards felt like a rebellion. I opened a drawer and found a folder I'd hidden months ago, tucked behind some towels, bank statements, the deed to the house, a copy of my pension account details. I hadn't known why I'd kept them secret then, but now it was clear. Some part of me had always sensed James's greed. I clutched the folder like a shield, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and resolve. Before I could second-guess myself, I heard James's voice from the living room, laughing at some late-night show. Lucas was probably in his room, spending my money on another game. They didn't know I was awake, didn't know I was planning. I wanted to storm out there, scream at James for forging my name, for stealing my home, but I didn't. Screaming wouldn't undo his lies. Action would. I zipped the suitcase, my hands steady for the first time in weeks. I wasn't just leaving, I was fighting back, reclaiming the pieces of me James thought he'd taken. Ellie's car pulled up at 1 a.m., headlights cutting through the dark. I hobbled out the back door, suitcase dragging behind me, my cane sinking into the soft grass of the backyard. James didn't hear me leave. Lucas didn't look up from his screen. The night air was cold, but it felt like freedom. Ellie opened the passenger door, her face a mix of worry and determination. "You're doing the right thing," she said, taking my bag. "We'll figure this out together." I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. As we drove away, the house faded in the rearview mirror, its porch swing swaying like a ghost of the life I'd lost. But leaving wasn't enough. James had taken too much. My money, my home, my trust. I needed to take it back, not with words, but with proof. Ellie's voice broke through my thoughts as we pulled onto the highway. "There's a lawyer I know, Margaret. She handles cases like this. Elder abuse, financial fraud. We'll start there." A lawyer? The idea felt foreign, like something from a TV drama, not my life. But as I gripped Tom's watch in my pocket, I felt a spark of something new. Not just anger, but power. James thought he'd broken me. He was wrong. He'd woken me up. But how do you fight a son who's already stolen your home? I was about to find out. Leaving James's house in the dead of night, with Ellie's headlights cutting through the Ohio darkness, wasn't just an escape, it was a declaration of war. I'd been burned, betrayed, and stripped of my home, but I wasn't broken. Not yet. My suitcase, stuffed with clothes and the folder of documents I'd hidden from James, sat heavy in Ellie's trunk, a reminder that I still had something he couldn't steal. My fight. As we pulled into her modest ranch-style home 10 miles away, my hip ached, but my heart burned hotter. I wasn't just running, I was gearing up to take back everything James thought he'd claimed. My money, my home, my life. Ellie didn't waste a second. By morning, she'd set up a meeting with a lawyer she knew, Sarah Coleman, a no-nonsense woman who specialized in elder financial abuse. We sat in Sarah's small office, papers spread across her oak desk like battle plans. I handed her the folder, bank statements showing $12,000 drained, the forged mortgage agreement on my house, my pension account details. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from a fury I could finally name. "He forged my signature," I said, my voice steady, despite the storm inside. "He took my home, my savings, everything." Sarah's eyes narrowed as she scanned the documents. "This isn't just theft, Margaret. It's fraud. We can freeze his access and start a case, but it'll get ugly. You ready for that?" Ugly? I'd already been burned by boiling water. I leaned forward, gripping my cane. "Do it." Sarah moved fast. Within hours, she'd filed an emergency request to freeze my pension account, blocking any further withdrawals by James. She contacted the bank, flagging every transaction from the past year, $300 here, $500 there, all funneled into James's accounts or spent on his toys. The mortgage was trickier, but Sarah found a loophole. The forged signature wasn't notarized. "That's our leverage," she said, her voice sharp. "We'll demand an audit of the loan. If it's fraudulent, the house reverts to you." My house. The one Tom and I had poured our hearts into, with its oak tree out front, and the porch swing where we'd planned our future. I nodded, my jaw tight. "Get it back!" Ellie stayed by my side, her presence like a shield. She drove me to the county courthouse to file a protective order, ensuring James couldn't access my accounts or come near me without legal consequences. As I signed the forms, my pen scratched the paper like I was carving my freedom into stone. "You're doing it, Margaret," Ellie said, squeezing my hand. "You're taking your life back." I looked at her, my eyes burning. He thought he could erase me. He's about to learn who I am. That afternoon, Sarah called with news. The bank had frozen James's linked accounts, and the mortgage company was launching an investigation. But James wasn't done. He blew up my phone, leaving voicemails that started sweet and turned venomous. "Mom, come on, let's talk this out," he said in the first one, his voice dripping with fake concern. By the third, he was snarling. "You're making a mistake. You think you can just cut me off? I'll fight this, Mom." Fight? He'd already fought dirty, forging my name, stealing my security. I deleted the messages, my hands steady now. He wasn't begging for forgiveness. He was begging for control, and I wasn't giving it back. I moved into a temporary room at Sunny Meadows, a senior community Ellie had found. It wasn't fancy, just a small studio with a view of a koi pond, but it felt like a fortress. For the first time in years, I locked a door that was mine. I sat on the bed, Tom's watch in my hand, its ticking a reminder of the life I was rebuilding. Sarah was working on a trust to protect my assets, something ironclad James couldn't touch. "We'll transfer the house title back to you," she promised over the phone. "And we're reporting the forgery to the Elder Protection Unit." Elder abuse. The words hit hard, but they were true. James hadn't just stolen my money, he'd stolen my dignity, and I was taking it all back. But winning this battle wasn't enough. James would come for me, I knew it. He'd show up, all charm and crocodile tears, or worse, with threats. I could still hear his voice in my head, that low growl from the kitchen. "You're out if you don't hand over the card." He thought he held all the cards, but I was rewriting the game. As I sat by the koi pond, watching the fish glide under the water, I felt a strength I hadn't known since Tom was alive. I wasn't just fighting for my house, I was fighting for me. But what would happen when James realized I wasn't backing down? When he came face to face with the mother he'd underestimated? I was about to find out, and I was ready. I'd locked the door to my new studio at Sunny Meadows, but I knew James wouldn't let me walk away so easily. He'd stolen my pension, forged my signature to mortgage my home, and burned me with boiling water. But I'd fought back, freezing his access, reclaiming my house, building a legal fortress with Sarah's help. I thought I was ready for anything. But when James and Lucas showed up at Sunny Meadows, their shadows darkening the brick path to the entrance, I realized this war wasn't over. They weren't here to apologize. They were here to take back control, and I was done giving it to them. It was a crisp Ohio morning, the koi pond outside my window shimmering under the sun. I was sipping tea, flipping through a library book, when the front desk buzzed my room. "Margaret, there's a James Carter and a young man here," the receptionist said, her voice calm but cautious. "They're demanding to see you." My heart thudded, not with fear, but with a cold, hard resolve. I'd spent years bending to James's demands, but not today. I told the receptionist, "Let them wait in the lobby. I'll decide if I'm coming." Ellie, who'd stopped by for coffee, grabbed my hand. "You don't have to face them," she said, her eyes fierce. "You owe them nothing." But I shook my head. "I need them to see me, Ellie. Not the mother they used, but the woman who's done." I stood at the edge of the sunroom, hidden behind tinted glass, watching James pace the lobby like a caged animal. His face was red, his fists clenched, the same fury I'd seen when he smashed my mother's bowl. Lucas slouched beside him, hoodie up, scrolling on his phone as if this was just another errand. The nerve of them, storming into my new sanctuary, thinking they could bully me back into submission. Security guard Doris, a sturdy woman with a no-nonsense stare, blocked their path. James raised his voice, loud enough for me to hear through the glass. "She's my mother. You can't keep me from her." Doris didn't budge. "Sir, you're not on the visitor list. Step back or you're out." I stepped into the lobby, my cane tapping a steady rhythm, my eyes locked on James. He froze, his mouth half open, like he hadn't expected me to face him. Lucas glanced up, his smirk fading when he saw my face. Calm, unflinching, a wall he couldn't climb. Mom, James started, his voice softening, that old charm creeping in. This is crazy. Let's go home. Talk this out. I didn't mean for things to get so messed up. Messed up? He'd stolen $12,000, forged my name, threatened to throw me out. I cut him off, my voice like ice. You don't get to rewrite this, James. You made your choice when you mortgaged my house. His eyes widened, then narrowed. You're listening to that lawyer, aren't you? She's filling your head with lies. That house is mine now. Yours? I snapped, my grip tightening on my cane. It's got my name on it, James. Always has. You forged my signature, but you can't forge the truth. Lucas shifted, muttering, Grandma, just chill. We're family. Family? The word stung, but I didn't flinch. Family doesn't burn their own with boiling water, Lucas. Family doesn't steal a home. Doris stepped closer, her hand on her radio, ready to call for backup. James's face twisted, his voice a low growl. You'll regret this, Mom. You're nothing without us. Nothing? I'd been nothing in his house, a shadow he used and discarded. But here, I was everything. I turned to Doris. Escort them out. James shouted, You can't do this! But Doris was already moving, her presence a wall of authority. Lucas tugged at his dad's arm, muttering, Let's go, Dad. She's serious. They left, James's curses echoing down the path. Lucas's head bowed. I stood there, watching through the glass doors, my heart steady for the first time in years. Later, Ellie handed me a crumpled letter James had shoved at Doris, an apology scrawled in haste, promising to make things right. I tore it in half without reading past the first line. His words were as empty as his promises. That confrontation wasn't just a moment, it was a line drawn in the sand. I'd faced James and walked away, not as his mother, but as Margaret, the woman who'd survived him. But I knew he wouldn't stop. He'd come back, with more lies or worse. As I sat by the koi pond that evening, Tom's watch ticking in my pocket, I wondered, what would it take to finally be free? To live without looking over my shoulder? I was about to find out. Standing in the lobby of Sunny Meadows, watching James and Lucas storm out. Their threats fading like smoke in the Ohio breeze. I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't just victory over their bullying or the legal walls I'd built with Sarah's help to reclaim my home. It was bigger, a reclaiming of myself, the woman James thought he'd burned away with boiling water and broken promises. I'd faced my son, looked into his eyes, and walked away, not as his mother, but as Margaret, whole and unbroken. That moment wasn't the end of my fight. It was the beginning of my freedom, a life I hadn't dared imagine since Tom's laughter filled our old house. Sunny Meadows wasn't just a place to hide. It was a sanctuary where I could breathe again. My studio, with its small balcony overlooking the koi pond, felt like a world apart from James's cage of a house. The first morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through the window. No sound of Lucas's video games or James's manipulative charm. I joined the book club, my hands steady as I turned pages of a novel, laughing with women who didn't see me as a burden. I tried yoga, my cane propped against the wall, chuckling as I wobbled through poses with others my age. "You've got grit, Margaret," said Clara, a retired librarian with a wicked sense of humor. Most folks would have folded by now. Folded? I'd been bent, burned, and betrayed, but I was still standing. Every day I built a little more of myself back. I walked the garden paths, the koi gliding beneath lily pads, their calm a mirror to the peace I was finding. I wore Tom's watch, its steady tick a reminder of the strength he'd always seen in me. One afternoon, sitting on a bench with a cup of chamomile tea, I pulled out a letter I'd started to him, words I'd never sent. "Tom," I wrote, "I let James take so much, but I kept the part of me you loved." I didn't cry. I smiled, because for the first time in years, I felt like the woman he'd married, fierce, not fragile. Ellie stopped by often, her visits a lifeline. One day she brought a photo from our old diner days, the two of us grinning over pancakes. "You're back," she said, her voice soft but sure. "The real Margaret." I nodded, my throat tight. I was gone too long. She squeezed my hand. "But you found your way." Ellie wasn't just a friend. She was proof I wasn't alone. The staff at Sunny Meadows, like Doris, who'd stood firm against James, treated me like family, not a guest. They'd seen stories like mine before, and their quiet support, leaving extra cookies on my tray, checking in without hovering, felt like a hug from the world I thought I'd lost. I wasn't naive. James's voicemail still came, though I'd stopped listening. Sarah called with updates. The mortgage company had voided the fraudulent loan, and my house was back in my name, safe in a trust James couldn't touch. The Elder Protection Unit was building a case, with evidence of his forgery and theft piling up like bricks in a wall. I didn't gloat. Justice wasn't about revenge. It was about boundaries, about saying, "You don't get to define me." I'd spent years thinking love meant giving everything, even when it hurt. Now, I knew better. Love without respect is just chains, and I'd broken mine. Sitting by the koi pond one evening, the sunset painting the water gold, I realized I wasn't just surviving. I was living. I'd traded James's house, with its lies and threats, for a community where I was seen, valued, not used. I thought of Tom, of the oak tree we'd planted, of the life we'd dreamed. I hadn't lost it. I'd carried it with me, and now I was building it anew. But this wasn't just my story. It was a wake-up call for anyone who'd ever felt small, used, or silenced. I'd found my voice, my strength, and I wanted others to find theirs. How could I share this? How could I help someone else break free? That's what I needed to figure out next, and I was ready to do it. Sitting by the koi pond at Sunny Meadows, with Tom's watch ticking softly in my pocket, I realized my story wasn't just about surviving James's betrayal or reclaiming my home. It was about finding my voice again, after years of being silenced by the son I loved. I'd been burned, robbed, and pushed out, but I stood up, not with anger, but with a quiet strength that no one could take away. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Love doesn't mean giving until you're empty. It means knowing your worth, even when those closest to you try to steal it. If you're feeling small, used, or trapped, whether by family or fear, don't wait for the pain to wake you up. Reach out, find help, stand tall. You're stronger than you know. I found my way with Ellie's support, Sarah's legal fight, and a community that saw me as Margaret, not a burden. My story isn't just mine. It's a call to anyone who's ever felt invisible. If it resonates, hit that like button, share your story in the comments, and subscribe to Voices of Mother Ruth. Let's lift each other up because no one should fight alone. Together, we can break the silence.